Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to another video for geometry with Mr. Soto. So we are on the second video for this year. We're going to go ahead and continue looking at midpoint, distance, and slope. But today this video is going to emphasize midpoint actually. We're going to go backwards with the midpoint this time though. So if you remember the formula, m equals x2 plus x1 over 2, comma, y2 plus y1 over 2. So this gets us the middle of 2 points. If you remember that, that's great. You should know this because that's why it's called the midpoint, because it's in the middle. So what we're going to do now is this time I'm going to give you one of the endpoints. So I'm going to tell you, hey, this is where Mr. Soto lives. I'm going to call him P for Pedro. And this line is what we're looking for. We're looking for all the points, right? So I already told you where the middle is, and I told you where I live, but I want to know where this person lives. And we need to do it mathematically. So that's what we're going to use this formula for. We're going to kind of go a little backwards. So before we even start this problem down here, I'm going to show you a little trick on the side here, so it kind of makes sense. So originally, the formula, midpoint, I'm going to write midpoint here. All you have to do is add your x's, then divide by 2. So add x's or y's, okay? Because you do that too. You add the x's first, and then you add the y's. You see how that's what it says in the formula up here? Don't overthink it. It's just saying the x's, I'm going to add them together. The y's, I'm going to add them together. Okay? So when you're doing the midpoint, you add the x's or you add the y's first. Okay? Then you divide by 2. Divide. I'm going to write that here just so you have that. That's the easy way of thinking. Divide by 2. So it's only 2 steps for each point. We got to add the x's or the y's and then divide by 2. That's all we're doing. So when we want the midpoint, we add the x's or y's and divide by 2. Nothing complicated about that. But if I want an end point, this is what the end point is. I'm going to do it in a different color here. I want the end point. This is called an end point, not the midpoint. I want the end point. Then I have to do this, but backwards. So let's think about that. If I want to do endpoint, and it's not the same as midpoint, then I just need to go backwards. So instead of dividing by 2, what's the opposite of dividing by 2? And you should have learned that in algebra. The opposite of division is multiplication. So instead of dividing by 2, I'm gonna multiply by 2. Sorry, my handwriting is a little sloppy today. Guess I'm not feeling my hands today. I don't know, something's wrong with me. But we're doing the opposite first. So instead of dividing by 2, I'm going to multiply by 2. And then the next step is to do this opposite. So instead of adding x's and y's, I'm going to subtract the x's and the y's. Subtract x's or y's, depending on which one you're doing. So to get an endpoint, I just do the opposite of the formula. So I don't want you to overthink it. So remember, for a midpoint, you add x's and y's, and then you divide by 2. But for an endpoint, we're going to go backwards. We're going to multiply by 2 first, and then subtract x's or y's, okay? So think of it like that. Don't overthink it. So in this example down here, it shows us clearly what they want. It says find the coordinates of P if the other point A is on here at -6, 8, and R is the midpoint at 2, 6. So they gave us the middle this time. So I'm gonna highlight that here. Oop, wrong color. So right here, this is the middle. It's telling us that R is the midpoint. So I'm gonna you don't have to draw the figure when you're doing this, but I'm going to draw it just so you have some notes on that. So this is what it looks like, or what it should look like in your brain. So it's a line, or people live places, and it's telling us that R is the midpoint. So R is right here. And it's telling us that this is 2, 6. So R lives at 2, 6. He's in the middle, but he lives at 2, 6. We want to know where P is. That's where the question's asking, where is P if A, this other point over here, the other endpoint, is at negative 6, 8. So A is at is one of the endpoints at negative 6, 8. Okay. I'm not going to draw the whole graph. You could have drawn a nicer graph, but this is an easy way of kind of thinking about, okay, where's the middle and who do I know? I know where A is. I know where the middle is. I'm looking for P. On the questions from the other day, we knew where the endpoints were and we were looking for the middle. But this time they gave us the middle and I want to know where the endpoint is. Okay? So to do that, I'm going to follow these steps. I'm not going to give you a formula. I'm going to give you steps to follow. So you're just going to multiply the x and the y by 2 and then subtract the x's or the y's. Okay? So let's see. This is the middle here. R is our middle. So just I'm highlighting it orange so you know where the middle is. And that's my x and y. If you remember, our x is 2 and our y is 6. So I'm going to put them like that. And what is my first step here? To multiply by 2, right? So I'm going to multiply each one by 2. So I'm going to put, I'm going to write it in a different color. Oops, sorry, I keep using the wrong color here. So the first step is to you don't have to write all of this when you're doing the math, but this is just for your notes. Multiply by 2. Okay? So what is 2 times 2? That's just 4, right? So now we know it becomes a 4. And what if I multiply 6 by 2? Oh, that becomes 12. Good. So all I did is multiply by 2, and then I have to subtract x and y, the x's and the y's. And what I mean by the x's and the y's is I have to use this guy over here, the endpoint. The endpoint is A, so I have to subtract the A because that's an endpoint. So I need to subtract 4 with the x, with this x, and the 12 with that 8. Okay? So I'm subtracting the x's and the y's. So my next step is to subtract x and y. Okay? Here's my and. So I need to subtract the x or the y. So what is my x for the endpoint? That's negative 6. So I'm going to put minus a minus 6 because it is a minus minus. Because I'm subtracting negative 6. And then I'm going to subtract 8 from 12. So I'm going to subtract 8. And I know that's confusing because this is already negative, but you're subtracting. So think of it like that. I'm subtracting a negative 6. So then I just do the math here. Remember, you can use a calculator or do whatever you need to do to help you. Remember, negative and negative make a positive. So 4 minus a minus 6 is actually a 10. And the same thing for this one actually. This one's actually easier. What's 12 minus 8? That is a 4. So now I know where my endpoint is. My endpoint, P, is at 10, 4. And this is where my endpoint is. So now I know where P is at. So again, just to reiterate, remember for midpoint you add x's and y's, then divide by 2. But for an endpoint we do this backwards. I got to do this backwards. So I multiply by 2 first, then subtract x's and y's. It's like I'm going the opposite way now. So in this case I'm going down for midpoint, but in this case I'm going the other way, you know? So I'm just following the same formula but backwards. So don't overthink it. It's really easy. Go ahead and start that assignment on the Go formative. If you need help, I'll still be on Zoom. So please leave me a message or chat if you need help. Y'all have a great rest of your day. Thanks.